Welcome to Behind the Camera, a show dedicated to the stories of the people who bring you the images of sport every day to your television. I am your host, Uncle Jesse. On today's show, I have a good friend of mine from Wisconsin. His name is Phil Link. He's a replay operator who has found himself in the position to be the guy that had the replay. Every one of us who does replay every day has that dream of someday having the look in the Super Bowl. Well, he had that look. He has the Tyree catch. He was one of the primary replays. So let me introduce you to my friend, Phil Link. How did you get into tape? How did you get into replay? How did you get into freelance sports television?
Jeez. I guess I'm dating myself now. I graduated MATC in 1994 with 2 associate's degrees in commercial television, video production, and visual communications. And then, dating myself. This is back when you did, like your final project was a 9 projector slideshow where they all synced up and made little pictures but made big pictures and that kind of stuff. I was still editing on reel-to-reel audio tape. You edit your click track to tell the projectors when to go. That rapidly disappeared. I think when I was there at MATC, there was Photoshop 1 was a thing.
Oh, wow.
PageMaker 1 was a thing. So I'm definitely dating myself now. Holy crap.
You're old.
So there, a lot of those classes, like when I was doing my typography commercial for commercial art, we were still doing type layout on marker paper, where you had lined paper underneath the transparency paper, so you could lay it there. I would go down, take my typography projects down to the desktop publishing lab, and do my typography layout on the computer. And I go upstairs, and my teacher would be like, "Well, computers are never going to replace hand layout." Okay, they did here, just so we're clear. I didn't tell him that until after he graded me. But there's still a thing to doing it with yourself, doing it by markers and paper is still a thing, but man, a computer made it so much easier to deal with. I ended up in visual communications, which had a bunch of classes that carried over into television video production over at channels 10 and 36, the PBS station. When I got over there, I was like, I don't need to go anywhere else. This is what I want to do. This is great. This is awesome. And I stayed there. I worked with the Art Star and stuff and the computer graphics stuff at the television station, which did all the weather maps, did all the graphics for those shows. And then when I graduated, I went over to the Bradley Center and started doing graphics stuff and working in the video suite. Because at that point in time, they had just put in a Jumbotron and they wanted to put the Coca-Cola logo on the scoring, on the standings. So here I am with a camera and a wall and a roll of white tape with artwork from that Coca-Cola sent us on a Dubner 20K, and which saying it out loud is nuts, but you have to shoot them in with a camera card and cut them out and then make them as part of the graphics. So I started with graphic design doing that and then just proceeded on. And then one day, a really good friend of mine who was working in that studio or in that control room, Lee, he said he needed an extra A2 for something, and I'm like, "What's an A2 do?" And he goes, "I'll do it." And he goes, "Well, that sets up field mics and announce tables," and it was for a women's Marquette basketball game. And I did that one day and made $375 for the day. And I was like, "Wow, this is amazing!" I'm like, "I ought to do more of this." So I was an A2, and it was back in the day before fiber, so I could, you could still go out there and solder stuff back together and fix it and do all the things you needed to do to make it all work. And I remember the day that the Milwaukee Brewers, when Midwest Sports Channel came in, it was because there used to just be like one telecast. It was either the home show or the away show. So you kind of weren't working when there was the senior guys were around. They brought in, they was like, "We're going to do not dual feeds, but 2 feeds all the time, home and away, home and away." We're like, "Oh, great, we need more tape people." So I volunteered. I'm like, "I want to learn tape." And at that point in time, there was a 1-inch machine and three Betacam SP machines. Oh, wow. That was how we did baseball. So the first year of baseball was the 1-inch machine and a Beta. And then midway through that season, they ripped the 1-inch machine out and put in a Mav. I don't know if anybody remembers the Mav.
I remember those.
Was it Mav 444 or something along those lines? Yeah. I don't even remember, but it was their disc recorder. And then all of a sudden that thing disappeared one day and an EVS showed up. And it was like, wow, this is amazing. I want to do this. And then it just became friends of mine like Dan Konyar and people like that would have let me play while they were doing it because they'd already been working on it. And they let me play, and I started doing that. I'm like, this is definitely what I want to do, and I just kept on with that. And Fox picked me up and we started doing football together. And then all of a sudden I ended up on a crew for that when Steve Cardamone invited me in. And that was awesome. So it's been it's 94 to now. It's crazy how long it's been.
All right. So it's 2007. You're sitting in the truck. It's a Fiesta Bowl, Boise State, undefeated season. And probably the craziest fourth quarter I've ever seen. I remember watching it at home as a fan. I'm like, oh my gosh, what is going on? This is insane. And then I remembered I have a friend working the game.
Mike Burks was producing, and it's one of those guys that he's a loud, in charge tape guy, producer who just loves you got to be an E to E all the time. So you spent the majority of your time, watching the game like everybody else and kind of clipping on the fly. And it was like you watched it happen and you're like, that just happened. And my buddy Andy Stieber was the two camera guy who didn't bite, and he didn't bite on the other play either. So it was like everybody, Russo was just screaming his head off. Yeah, dude, nice job. Nothing. Andy saved the show and everything else. But you go back and think about that play. I had the Sky Cam, which was, we had just started using that thing, and I had the Far Side Mini Mo, which is a mini super mo, 3 times. So I felt like I was on the air the entire day because the Sky Cam, it just was, Sky Cam, Sky Cam, Sky Cam, Sky Cam, and then Far Side Mo, which everything seemed to come to me that day. I couldn't tell you the camera guys. I don't know the Sky Cam guys. I don't know the handheld operator. I cannot remember to save my life. But it felt like all I did was replays all day long that day because it was just everything happened to me, which, as well as I do. There's games where you can sit there and nothing comes to you all day long and you just watch a TV show with everybody else. So when that whole thing happened, I just was in such a mode. I queued it up and just waited and, just sold it, and we went to it. And then right away, the hook and ladder was one because they must have looked at that a couple of times. And then then they run the Statue of Liberty right after that to win it, and then it's like you run the play, the guy goes right to his knee. Burks was like, "Holy, what do we do?" So they covered it live, and they went back and replayed the whole shooting match, and it was just like I was like, "Holy cow, this is the best telecast I've ever been part of." It was like my first year doing bowl games for Fox. I think John Howard was the TD. And that game was perfect. It was like we just all did our jobs, and it was so much fun. I think Nick Franklin was behind me. I can't even remember the people that were in the room, but it was. I even think Rich Dewey might have been our tape producer that day. He was doing the cameras that weren't watching football, like Idaho and all these that were just watching fans, just producing those. So it was pretty cool. It was an interesting situation. I never had so much fun, to be honest with you. We all got done with that thing, and Burks came back, and he just like, guys, that was the best game I've ever done. It was so much fun. It was so awesome. And then we go in to do the BCS championship the next week, and it was not the same, not at all. The game wasn't as good. Everybody was all puckered up, and everyone was like, "Oh, it's going to be as good as the last game." No, it wasn't. It was not as much fun, and it was just not the same, to say the least.
So when the Statue of Liberty play happens and it's coming right at you, what's the first thing you're thinking? I mean, are you looking at the Skycam first? You're looking at the handheld, or are you just kind of reacting?
Because I kind of, that was the primary look for everybody off, like it is now. Everybody, it was just like, holy cow, I just basically sold that because I'm like, this shows the whole thing. Here it is. He still got the ball. You're like, I want to, but Burks he's not one of those guys you sell like that to. You just kind of let it go, and then you sell, and he knew where he was going. He saw it happening. But it was just like, ooh, look what's happening. Oh, I got that. That's going to be me again. And again, like I'd been in a habit all day. It was always sky to mo, it felt like I was going back and forth all day long. So I didn't really have, it was just like old hat at that point at the end of the day. But just to see that win, see Oklahoma lose to that team, and then to cap it off with the wedding proposal, the marriage proposal, and everything else, it was pretty cool.
All right, so another great moment in your career, which again, it seems like I'm sitting at home watching. You get to do all the fun. So I remember working the Super Bowl. I forget what year it was, but it was when the Giants. It was here in Phoenix, and so I worked for NFL Network.
In Phoenix, yeah.
Yeah. So I was working.
That was my first Super Bowl. My first Super Bowl ever. I had never done one before until then.
Yeah, it was my first Super Bowl too. I was out. We finished up in the NFL experience, and I rode the bus. And the glamour that is when you're not actually working the game is you get on a bus and they send you home. So I get on a bus and I'm listening to most of the game. I got home just in time for the fourth quarter, and I think I got tuned in a couple minutes before the catch. Probably one of the most famous catches in Super Bowl history. And what was going through your mind, and what replay angles were you on that one?
Well, I had something really weird, and like I said, it was my first Super Bowl, so I had never been part of a show big enough where you needed a sub switch. So, or tape release, whatever you want to call it, but they call it sub switch at that point in time. So there was another truck with a switcher that took all the, let's say, the outer ring of tape machines that got added on to the show that wasn't the normal stuff. And they all sat in his switcher. And at some point in time, they had been playing around with it wasn't Fletcher, it was the Exmo, the Phantom camera.
Oh,
and at that point in time, the Phantom camera operators used to trigger it on their own. They had a button on their camera, like the thumb switch on the camera would trigger the replay, because they were doing like 700 or 800 frames, something like that, something that's just unheard of. The 3x cameras were amazing, but they didn't look anything like this just because of how slow it was and how many frames it was. But the real bear with it was they were doing it for a while, and then it was like you were never getting the thing you wanted to see. Like, the tape guy was basically playing back whatever the camera guy wanted to show you. And at one point in time, they said, well, why don't we just give it to the tape guy and let the tape guy figure out what he wants to see? So all of a sudden, I've got this little box with a red button on it. It's like it could have launched the space shuttle. It could have blew up the stadium. Who knew what it could have? It could have done anything. It was just a little red button, and I taped it right to the upper left corner of my EVS remote, and I spent 4 days. They were changing frame rates and stuff and trying to figure out what was going to be the best for dark, at night with the lights and everything else. And you see what you wanted to have happen, and you had to count to 6 or 7, 1001, 1002. Like, you saw it happen, and then you started counting in your head. And by the time you hit 1007, you push the red button. And then all of a sudden, it would start playing out the stuff, the frames all stacked up so you could see it. And I just practiced for like 4 days, just trying to make sure that if I saw something, I would be like, that's what I want to see. Poof, push the button and then play out. So it got to the point where I think I may have made it on 1 or 2 times in the game, because we were reverse 50 camera, and Keith DeSantis, if I remember it, was my camera guy, which I'm not exactly sure he even recognized me if we walked past each other, but I know he's been on shows I've been on, since then. But Keith was all over it. I mean, reverse 50 with that shot, it was you saw the whole thing because it wasn't obstructed by the way that he fell down. And you hit the red button, and all of a sudden there it was. And I'd hit such good stuff all day with Keith that they had left me up and sub switch the whole time, so that it was always the first look they could see it. And I remember selling that one, and I was like, oh my God, you got to see this. And I don't even know what the name of my machine was, but it was perfect. It couldn't have been shot any better. And it was like, you just see the ball come down, never touch the ground. And he rolls out with it. And it's just like, but before that, even I was fighting the urge to hit the button, because watching Manning get away from everybody. The scramble that he did, that zigzag in and out of people was nuts. You thought he was going to be sacked, and all of a sudden he just lets the ball go and he comes up with that catch. You're like, what do I push? In the time, I'm like, screw it, I'll wait till the end. There's so many other looks of that guy scrambling around, it won't make a difference if I'm showing that or not. It's so slow. And I came up with it. It was awesome. It was the best replay I ever had. It was in the Super Bowl where the undefeated Patriots got spanked-ish by the New York Giants, and it was awesome.
Yeah. So
cool
you hit the red button a little too early. You don't have that replay.
No, it's gone. It would have never. If I hit it too early, it would have been. What would have happened is it would have been like, oh yeah, it's there, and it would have froze right at the ball getting caught. I had to figure out the math. I sat there for the longest time watching a guy kick a ball, and then kick a ball. Okay, 1001, 1002, 1003. Push the button. I'm like, oh, okay. So it gets to the point just as he's kicking through the ball. So I kept having to add more. Like how much more do I go? Then I had a little chart because when they changed frame rates, it changed the number of your count. So it was silly, but it was fun, and it was the neatest thing I've ever been part of. To be perfectly honest, I thought that was the most perfect telecast I'd ever been part of. But we didn't win anything. But we had a good game.
That's awesome. So what was it like in the tape room with everybody else? I mean, did anyone else know it was you, or is it just kind of everyone's doing their gig and everyone's trying to figure out?
Doing that. That was a weird one because we were in the original Big Fox. I think it was a 3-truck unit, or was it a 2-truck unit at that time, where they had set up tables back along the backside of the back bench.
Wow.
So there was 2 of us there. I think I was sitting I might have been sitting next to Nick Franklin again. I'm pretty sure it was Nick Franklin. And then on the other side of the room was Trey Dixon and Brian Unverzak sitting on the other wing behind on the back bench. And it was pretty cool. But, everybody, all Duda and all those guys are still there. And it was just cool to see that Exmo make it in. And after that, the Exmo was everywhere.
That's awesome. Well, I appreciate you taking the time today. It's a lot of fun, a lot of great stories. We'll have to do it again.
Uh-huh. Absolutely.
Phil threw out a lot of terms that you may not be familiar with, like 1-inch machine, MAV. I mean, some of that is before a lot of our time, and some of you at home don't even know what we're talking about. Visit our website at behindthecamerapodcast.com. There I will be posting links to the things he was talking about so that you can find out more information for yourself and research behind the scenes of what we do. Thanks to Phil for taking the time to join us today, and thank you for watching. We'll see you next time.